Rachel.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. Yeah, it's like already starting to get dark here. So I'm really feeling the difference of those couple hours as like the
Yeah.
sun's gone down and about an hour and a half it'll be dark.
Thanks.
Um,
So Wrigley wants to say hi,
yeah,
and
good morning.
also that the dog groomer is coming around 9. So if I
Okay,
flee for a few minutes, it'll just be getting them
no problem.
organized.
Is Thursday morning her regular routine?
Yeah. And it's very nice. She comes to me, so it's really a lovely indulgence.
It makes life easier for sure.
Yes, exactly. And how was gosh, it was a while ago, but how was was it Over the Rainbow Connection?
Oh, Duke's show. It was so good. I cried the whole time. He
Oh.
actually, one of the songs he sang was from The Greatest Showman, A Million Dreams. And the soundtrack is so good, the
Yeah.
whole thing. But we've been singing it nonstop, and we found the piano version too. So he and I are playing it together, which is just one of those parenting moments when you're like, okay, if I could just bottle this up and remember how it feels for him to be excited and say, oh, mom, come play the bottom and I'll play the top and we'll sing it together. So there's something about that 7-year-old boy singing voice. And, maybe we can tie this into the signature series because it was talking about preciousness and impermanence. Like, it will not last. It won't always be that pure little soprano. So something about it feels extra sweet.
I muted myself. It's great. It's just hold on to every moment.
I guess this is everybody. We'll let Jess and Sean and Mike settle in, and you don't have to turn on your cameras if you don't want to. That's fine. How's everybody else this morning?
I'm doing
Breathing?
good. I might go off camera at some points. Just I'm with Volta a little bit this morning. Always, every
No
day,
problem.
but particularly this morning.
What's the countdown to his birthday?
Oh my goodness, I don't know. Like 23rd, right? So is that 16 days? Wait,
Today's the 9th, so
the 9th
14
is today.
days.
14 days.
2
there
weeks.
You go.
Wow.
2
Almost
weeks.
there.
Wow. Thanks for bringing that into my mind.
You got to celebrate. It's a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
All right, well, let's get started and then we can maximize our time. We're going to jump into emotional agility where we left off, but I feel like this week might be a little less gutting than last week. We'll see. We are talking emotions, but let's share my screen. Pick up where we left off. So we left off right around here with the reminder that feelings are messengers. And that they might just be a cue to pay attention to something, or maybe we need to take action on whatever it is that is showing up. And we talked about Susan David and her work, just kind of introducing it right before we wrapped up last week. And this reminder that emotional agility is a process. Sorry, guys, for the trippiness there. I'm going to get you up top. Oy. There, we'll just do that. It's a process that enables us to navigate life's twists and turns. And it's not about ignoring our difficult emotions and thoughts. And I think that's maybe the core of her message. It's about holding them loosely, facing them courageously and compassionately, and then moving past them when we're ready to ignite change. And we talked briefly about these 4 essential steps of emotional agility. So number 1 is just show up, just face your emotions. 2, step back from the story or any habitual stories that might keep you hooked. 3, walk your why. So find your purpose, that why. We've talked about this a lot in terms of Studio B, being able to identify what our why is, and then to try to embody that in everything we do, taking the long view of our lives. And then finally move on, setting goals and tweaking your routine so that you can start to achieve those goals. And so I'm going to share with you just a few examples of Susan David's bite-sized bits of content that I find so high in value. This is her emotional pyramid of needs. So at the bottom, you see gentle acceptance, keyword gentle. It is what it is. Above that, compassion, this idea that we can expect tough emotions, and so we have to meet ourselves where we are. Above that, the routine, creating pockets of our healthy routine and letting go of what we cannot control. Above that, connection, community being essential to our well-being. Above that, courage to reset, making habits out of more conscious behaviors. And finally, wisdom, the reminder that life's beauty is inseparable from its fragility. So a lot of these things parallel topics we've talked about already in terms of Studio B and what our core values are. So here again, we have this idea of feelings as messengers. Our raw feelings can be those messengers that we need to teach us things about ourselves, and they can prompt insights into important life directions. They're teachers. And research shows that attempting to minimize or ignore thoughts and emotions, shove them down into the corner because they're inconvenient, only serves to amplify them. Distressing feelings can actually teach us valuable lessons once we can step back and stop smothering them with positive affirmations or rationalizations. And this one especially makes me think of this notion of spiritual bypassing when we use spiritual practices or new age verbiage, things like that, to bypass difficult feelings by jumping right to the positive affirmation instead of letting ourselves sit with the fullness of everything complicated that we're feeling. Emotional agility is a process that allows us to be in the moment, changing or maintaining our behaviors to live in ways that align with our intentions and values. So this sounds a lot to me like presence, which sounds a lot like mindfulness. So we mentioned this briefly earlier, but this idea that we can allow feelings to just be as they are. We don't have to manipulate them. We don't have to try to change them immediately. You can think of them as guests, visitors. They're arriving, they're going to linger for a while and then leave. So what we want to think about as mindful people is how will we host those feelings that come and go, like visitors to our home. And this brings up a famous poem by the Sufi poet Rumi called The Guest House. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. One of the words in this poem that strikes me is laughing. Meet them at the door, not cowering in fear or with your eyes covered, but open and laughing in this like spirit of play and this willingness to do the divine dance that is, ride the roller coaster of emotion. So this one is very famous and quite popular because it is a great way of sort of envisioning what it's like to walk through the world and feel all the human things that come with that. And this piece really makes me think of Tara Brach. Sorry, guys, I want to try to get you up high here. There we go. Okay, so Tara has always spoken really beautifully on this idea of inviting Mara to tea. And this is a clip from her book, Radical Acceptance from 2003. And so I'm just going to read this because it is such a valuable tool to put in your toolkit. So Tara says, even after the Buddha had become deeply revered throughout India, the demon god Mara, with whom he'd wrestled, continued to make unexpected appearances. The Buddha's loyal attendant, Ananda, which means bliss, always on the lookout for any harm that might come to his teacher, would report with dismay that the evil one had again returned. However, instead of ignoring Mara or driving him away, the Buddha would calmly acknowledge his presence, saying, "I see you, Mara." He would then invite him for tea and serve him as an honored guest, offering Mara a cushion so that he could sit comfortably. The Buddha would fill 2 earthen cups with tea, place them on the low table between them, and only then take his own seat. Mara would stay for a while and then go. But throughout, the Buddha remained free and undisturbed. When Mara visits us in the form of our most challenging demons, in the form of troubling emotions or fearsome stories, we can say, I see you, Mara, and clearly recognize the reality of craving and fear that lives in each human heart. By accepting these experiences with the warmth of compassion, we can offer Mara tea rather than fearfully driving him away. Seeing what is true, we hold what is seen with kindness. We express such wakefulness of heart each time we recognize and embrace our hurts and fears. Is this a familiar little parable, or is this new to everybody?
I've not heard that before.
Yeah, it's new for me too.
Every time I read it, it strikes me as really powerful. I mean, when I think about things in my life that have tortured me the most or frightened me the most, and then think about offering them a cushion to sit down in my house, making them tea and sitting and having tea together. It's unbelievable how the Buddha stays free, liberated, and undisturbed in that moment. Does this feel like a reasonable practice, or does it feel far away?
Feels different. You know, I acknowledge the anxieties and things that I have, but then I don't immediately move to try to get past them. So like the morning routine does not include hanging out with them. So that may be worth an effort, but yeah, that's different for me.
I imagine it's different for most of us. Like even parenting a small child in the last several years, I've spent a lot of time around other parents of small children, and it's fascinating to see how many parents say to their crying child, stop it, be quiet, or stop crying. And how common it is for us adults to shut down children when they are maybe expressing their emotions. And I imagine that a lot of us maybe experience that as children, and then as adults hear that voice in our minds when we're feeling big feelings.
I'm just thinking that this certainly wasn't modeled for me, and how hard it is to shift to something like this.
It's so hard. It's a practice for sure.
I think the acknowledging part, and I like the idea of even using I see you, Mara, as like an anchor in those moments. Acknowledging I can do. It's like the letting go step that tends to really be tricky.
Sharon Salzberg talks about how she gave her sort of negative inner committee a name. And so anytime she's beating herself up or speaking unkindly to herself, it's Lucy. And so she'll say, I hear you, Lucy, or I see you, Lucy, or yeah, Lucy, I know. And then because she kind of personifies that aspect of herself that is hard on herself, she's able to step away in that kind of witness observer mode and create some space instead of getting caught up in it.
Maybe like a really funny name like Dave or Stephen.
Bruce. It has to be something definitely mid-century, like born in 1946 or so. Gary. But look how light that is. Isn't that interesting? How just the
Bruce
power.
might be the winner, Rach. I don't know. I think Bruce is the winner.
Shut up, Bruce. I hear you, Bruce. Well, that's your homework for the next week is to pick a name. Sorry, go ahead, Jess.
Oh no, I was gonna say I tried this like I even use like popcorn. I tried a bunch of different words and names. And I don't mean to stop the playfulness because it's so helpful to laugh for me anyway. I love comedy for that reason. Like I love it. And when I'm really in the heat of it, like the funny name actually doesn't work for me because I'm like, yeah, this is stupid. See, like, you know. So what I end up doing is just talking like I say Jess. Like I'll just be like, Jess, okay, right now you're having this thought. You're like, this is an intrusive thought. Like I think I shared this last week or some week. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But either way, like the third person thing, which I also sometimes would have the story of being goofy. Hey, honey. That actually works quickly and potent, like in a potent way, more so than some of the more fun or like kind. Even though I think innately it is kind to witness what's happening, it's not like forcing kindness. Like, okay, darling, like I don't do it. I just don't do that. In the heat of a anxious moment, I'm not like, okay, sweetheart. Like sometimes when I've been practicing my compassion for like months on end, I'm like, oh yeah, I can get right there. But like when I'm not in the bike of compassion, I'm like, what's this weird gym? I'm not gonna pick these weights up. Like, you know what I mean? So, but that self-talk that with the you pronoun is really quick for me. And I also just want to say something that I love about just what we do in general as sharing mindfulness in this particular way, the way that you're sharing, Rachel. The element of not trying to add positive, like over positive. Yeah, sorry, my mind is a little stretched, but adding a bunch of the positive like feelings that, you know, forcing that into like this spiritual bypassing, because I often hear in a lot of trendy modern mindfulness spaces, like whatever doesn't serve you, just let it go. And I'm like, well, wait a second, because you might think that, you know, not paying attention to this particular element is not serving you, but like it is serving you. You have to look at it. And so I don't know. I'm just going to say that I appreciate that. That's all. This context, this shaping of it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jess. That's a good reminder too, because I think that's like the IFS work too. You know, so much of I work with Tripti fairly regularly, and so much of it is, you know, not further banishing those parts. You know, because a lot of those parts are like really chatty or really really disruptive because, you know, maybe it's childhood conditioning or whatever it is, but you're like, you know, me growing up, like big feelings it was like a luxury we didn't have time for, you know, like big feelings. And so Rachel, when you were talking about that, like I have memories of things like that, and not even necessarily from my parents, but so it's this conditioning of self, and then you see how that ripples out. So Jess, I appreciate that, because yeah, it like you don't want to let it, you should, like the let it go is important in the sense that like you don't let things rule you, but the feeling it is important first, and understanding it and befriending it first. It's like you can't skip that part.
And sometimes it really does feel like we leap right over that middle step of sitting with it just to get to the process of letting go. But this sitting with this, sitting and having our cup of tea quietly on our cushions together in the tension, that's important. And that's the only way that we have ever transform any of it or learn from it. Otherwise, it does just turn into that spiritual bypassing. So we're often very hard on ourselves. We want to practice loving kindness and tenderness toward ourselves in these difficult, big feeling emotions, especially. And this is known as the second arrow. And this is a really fundamental concept in mindfulness. It's the idea that, let's say you feel guilty or angry about something, and that's the first arrow. The second arrow is when you beat yourself up for feeling guilty or angry about something. So feeling wrong about what we're feeling, maybe we're really depressed and it's the holiday season and everything's joy and there's our family and we have enough to eat and we have a place to sleep. And so we're really depressed, which is the first arrow. And the second arrow is when we beat ourselves up and say, you shouldn't be depressed because look at all you have and you have a great life. There's nothing to be sad about, yada, yada, yada. So whatever we're feeling is that first arrow. The second arrow is when we sort of pile guilt or shame or harsh self-judgment on top of that. And so this harshness causes much, additional stress and suffering, and it can take us out of the moment. I'll give an example. We have a really bad corona situation here, and after a fall of things being really safe at our school, which is highly vaccinated and masked, and in the last week or so, there were quite a few cases in the 4th and 5th grade. And so they do a weekly test every Wednesday morning in school. And then usually we get the results Wednesday evening about 6 o'clock and my phone pings and it's all negative. Woo, we made it another week. We didn't get a message last night. And finally at 9 o'clock, the school sent a message and said, the labs are busy. We still haven't processed all the tests. We'll get back to you in the morning. So all of us were anxious and afraid that we would be, quarantined today when we woke up. And I woke up at 3:30 this morning thinking about it and worrying about it. What would happen if we had to switch to quarantine, all this. And so I couldn't get back to sleep. So the first arrow was I was worrying about this. And the second arrow was then I spent like 3 hours in bed saying, oh, why can't you sleep? You shouldn't be worrying about this. You should be sleeping. You shouldn't worry. And, just be in the moment, do your meditation stuff. So, the second arrow was me kind of being harsh with myself for worrying about this. So it was, and then at 7 o'clock, we got the text that everybody was negative. So I missed 3.5 hours of sleep just for that second arrow. But it was this moment, even now, I think, gosh, I wish I could have been more gentle with myself. Our bodies don't always do what we want them to do. And it was a perfect opportunity to practice. And I didn't do a very good job of it, I guess. But now's the time when I have to yank that second arrow out and say, okay, I did what I could. Next time, try again. So from here, we look at feelings as a part of all human experience. This is the nature of
Excuse me,
feelings.
Rach.
Yeah.
Sarah, who's being quiet because of the coffee grinding,
Sorry.
asked in the chat, does this apply to being upset with other people too?
Does this apply to
The
being
second
upset
arrow.
with other people too? That's a good question. I'm not sure what the answer is to that. I think what this makes me think of is when we talked about neuroscientist Jill Pulte Taylor earlier, and how she said an emotion really only lasts for 90 seconds. And it's when our minds perseverate on that emotion that we suffer. And so I can see how the second arrow could apply to someone else's behavior when our minds are perseverating and we're feeling anxious or angry or upset for a day because of someone else's behavior. That sounds a lot like a second arrow to me too. But I welcome anybody else's thoughts. I see a baby forehead too, which is amazing.
Yeah, Volta has something to say. I really appreciate this question too, Sarah. I'm thinking for me, when I'm thinking about a difficult situation or person, it's a person I'm having difficulty with, which I am right now thinking of this person. What I've done is letting go is interesting. It's spectrum for me. It's phases. And so letting go right now of me having to do anything with my feelings. So is that like, I don't know if that's even helpful or not, but it's just like, I think that's a version of I see you, Mara, but it is letting go for me too. It's like, I'm going to let go of the action here is not so active. It's more like Rachel said, sitting with it. And that to me feels like a step in letting go.
It makes me think of what we do with the breath. We talked about the optimal breath, and it's the kind we're not striving to change and we're not striving to manipulate. Like in that sitting with that moment, just accepting it as it is, not trying to reshape the narrative or watercolor it so it's shinier or prettier than it is.
I think sorry, Josh is like leaving for work and he like couldn't be more, it's just, there's so much going on and I'm like, so the question is like, the timing is hilarious too, because I'm just like, will you get out of here? Yeah, I think that when I feel hurt by someone, I think what gets really murky for me is like if I sit with something and like release it in any way, there's a part of me that thinks like, well, then you're not like setting the boundaries you need to be setting, or it's like you're not holding someone accountable or some, which I know is like, what's the parable, like like holding on to anger is, what I'm talking about, like where it's like it'll
Right.
like burns yourself or something like that.
You get poisoned or burned. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that's like one of them, and this has like been my whole life. It's just been like this really complicated, like I want to let something go, but how do you let something go? And I still feel pain, but if I stop feeling pain, does that mean they get off the hook? Or like it gets so messy.
I
I
wonder
know
if
it's a big question, but
letting go maybe means accepting the fact that we can't change what has already happened. Like releasing the wish that we could change what did happen or transform what we're not pleased with.
right.
And instead being in the moment and saying, okay, things being what they are, where do I go from here? That feels like it could mean some kind of letting go.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So looking at feelings, they're all part of all human experience. They are impermanent. They do not last forever. And they have tones or flavors, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. We tend to react in one of three ways when we're feeling something difficult that arises in our awareness. First of all, we might resist or fight it. Second of all, we might get engulfed, totally overwhelmed or hijacked, kind of get yanked around by our emotions. And then finally, we might deny or minimize them. What we resist, however, persists. So when we actually attend to what we're feeling during meditation, even when something uncomfortable comes up, we might notice the feeling intensify. We might notice that it decreases. It might change, or it might dissolve. And how we feel about how we feel is often shaped by the following: social and cultural scripts, gendered scripts, and lived personal experience. So repression, suppression, or denial of feelings can lead to tension, discomfort, or literal pain and illness. Some of these sort of well-known tropes include feelings buried alive, survive, or what we resist persists. So Atlas of the Heart, I talked about this briefly last week, and this is a new book by Brene Brown. And if you have more time with podcasts, definitely search for her name because she's got some great interviews out right now. This is all about mapping meaningful connection and the language of human experience. So Brene writes, if we want to find the way back to ourselves and one another, we need language and the grounded confidence to both tell our stories and to be stewards of the stories that we hear. In Atlas of the Heart, we explore 87 of the emotions and experiences that define what it means to be human and walk through a new framework for cultivating meaningful connection. This is for the map makers and travelers in all of us. So when we can deal skillfully with our feelings, that's when we really develop emotional intelligence, agility, and resilience. So here's one tool for you. It's called the ABCs of feelings, a skillful approach. So you start with awareness, A, and then B, balance, striking a balance between resistance or overwhelm and denial. C, curiosity, that spirit of investigation, and S, create space to include it all, which makes me think of IFS and this idea that we have all of these different parts and there's space for them all, that all parts of you are welcome. And another tool is the 4 C's, calm, compassionate, curious, and creative. So say you're having a difficult feeling, you can ask yourself, can I be with this calmly? Can I be compassionate and kind as I feel this? And then just investigate it with curiosity. What is this like? How does this feel? And what does this tell me? And then finally ask yourself, how can I be creative in working with feelings? So we're going to wrap up lesson 5 with a brief meditation. So if you just want to come to any comfortable seat, whatever feels good in your body today, grounding yourself, finding that nice tall spine, shoulders soft, lips soft, hands on your thighs, or maybe palms up in your lap. Growing tall through the crown of your head, and yet really softening into your body just as it is. Let yourself drop into the natural rhythm of your breath. I'm going to read a brief poem by Dana Falls. It's called Allow. There is no controlling life. Try corralling a lightning bolt, containing a tornado. Dam a stream, and it will create a new channel. Resist, and the tide will sweep you off your feet. Allow, and grace will carry you to higher ground. The only safety lies in letting it all in, the wild and the weak, fear, fantasies, failures, and success. When loss rips off the doors of the heart, or sadness veils your vision with despair, practice becomes simply bearing the truth. In choosing to let go of your known way of being, the whole world is revealed to your new eyes. Let's sit in stillness here for a few minutes. Any thoughts or reflections on how that showed up in your body or your mind?
I appreciate that pause. And what it came up, it's more of a mind thing, I guess, is that I'm often thinking about maybe I'll name, you know, the voice that's being critical or something, or maybe I'll even use that self-talk like I was talking about. But in this meditation, I was like, what if I named or like at least spoke to the wise voice that's always there? Because, you know, there is this committee, and maybe if they're all at a dinner table, for instance, like the ones that are standing might be critical or whatever, or the fearful one, the one that's not able to forgive or whatever. But there's always the fact that I'm aware that there's a dinner table and that there are people. That's the one, that's the wise one. So if I'm feeling afraid, like there is a part that's knowing that then is not afraid. So could I speak to that one more? Could I, and I don't know if naming, so in this meditation, I was doing a lot of thinking, but I was not, I don't think now I would name, but maybe I would just be like, hey, wise one, are you there? Can you speak up? Like that might even sound a little goofy, but just speak to it. you know, because the fact that I'm allowing discerning awareness to be is, that means it's, you know, it's there. So I don't know, that's what came up in this meditation kind of quite a bit, actually.
A lot of good stuff for a quickie. That makes me think of Ram Dass and how he talks about loving awareness and how we are all loving awareness. Is loving awareness the wise one?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I think the natural wisdom is the voice that says, what would love have me do today? And it's kind, it's not nice, trying to be pleasing. It's fiercely, it's like, it's real, you know? It doesn't spiritually bypass, is what I think I'm trying to say.
I like that, Jess. Thanks for sharing. I want to like spend some time with my wise one because I know what you're like. That all felt familiar, and I like the like I could like I like the image of, you know, like the troublemakers are the ones that are like louder or standing or crowding or, you know, um, but to find that like the steady one, I like that a lot. I I had a incredibly like physical response to the word allow. Like it, like my whole body, like um like said thank you, like oh like there was like an exhale. um and I tried to I you know, I did keep returning to just the physical, like because I was really enjoying the physical, so like the weight of my body, like how it was resting everywhere it was resting. I was really enjoying the sensations that I was feeling physically. um but it made like when the thinking part would kind of pull me away. um yeah, I just realized like how much of my life is spent like striving, doing, producing. Like it's like, you know, like I'm exhausted. I'm really tired. Like I had that moment where like the word allow just like it hit me like a loving ton of bricks. Yeah.
It's interesting because you mentioned doing, going, striving, and I found myself thinking of the word resistance, like
Mm.
allowing versus resisting, and wondering how much of our lives do we spend resisting? Actually, what
Yeah.
is? And it reminds me of what we talked about with Reverend Angel Kyoto Williams and how she says suffering comes when we're constricted, contracted, in that state of resistance, and that liberation comes when we are at ease, when we open, when we allow. So that, you know, I can feel a palpable sense of that, Sarah, as you talk about the way your body kind of dropped.
Yeah. Mm.
I'm glad that little poem packed a punch. So we're going to move right into lesson 6, which is just an extension of lesson 5. It's part 2. And our focus now, so our focus on the last lesson was self-awareness, right? Which is, again, what Brene Brown really lifted up as the whole heart of her new book, this ability to be aware of what we're feeling, especially in relationship to one another. So our focus for this lesson is looking at some skillful ways of meeting feelings, especially the difficult ones. And we just did a silent meditation. So I'm going to move past this additional 3-minute silent meditation for now, if that's okay. And what we want to look at is this power of language and the way that language shapes our experiences. And in this case, we're talking about managing emotions versus meeting emotions. So if you think of the word manage, you think of like, oh, you're wrangling something, you're manipulating it, you're really controlling it, you're grappling with it. You're that awful micromanager that you had when you were 16, and you felt completely manipulated by that person. The opposite is meeting those emotions. So we're not manipulating our emotions. We're not controlling them. We're leaning into them. We're saying, hello, hi, I see you, Mara. Come on in. Opening up to them, inviting them in. So meeting, it feels much softer. So the question becomes, how do we meet emotions or feelings that are challenging? So we want to talk about what it means to be reactive. If you can throw out a word here that you think of, when I say the word reactivity, how does it feel?
Angry, red, impatient, and often self-defeating.
I think of the word short-sighted.
Mm-hmm. I think of hot. I think of breathless, knee-jerk, definitely angry, maybe thoughtless.
Out of control.
Mm-hmm. Like our friend here who's blowing smoke out of his ears with the bright red face. Look how clenched his fist is. It feels a
We
little
need to-
violent.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I was gonna say, do we need one of those like megaphones at work? Like what's going on there?
So along those lines, how do we know when we're reactive? I think we covered some of that in a few of these words that we threw out. Any other ways that you know you're reactive?
Like on a day-to-day basis or in the moment?
Let's say both, either or.
Well, I just get more and more impatient, and then I do something stupid. Like I was on the phone with a customer service person, and actually I think I'm answering what are top triggers, and my top trigger is being blocked and like inefficiencies and wasting my time. And there's twice recently I've done this. I wanted to get new glasses, and just the optometrist, not the optometrist, like the assistant at the store was just dragging her feet, and I could not handle it. So I was like, just give me all my paperwork. I'm going to a new doctor. And it turns out that I don't like this new doctor.
Oh no.
But I do this, like, this is my thing. Like I also I was dealing with something with the credit card company, and I just got angrier and angrier and angrier, and I just hung up because they were just being stupid and wasting my time. And I don't like it when people waste my time. But ultimately, like now I have to go back and do the whole phone call again. And it was self-defeating and short-sighted.
Isn't
But
that
I just-
interesting that when we get triggered by lack of efficiency, it ends up leaving our lives less efficient because we
Exactly.
have to go back and do the shit again.
Yeah.
Volcanic.
Ah. Mhm.
That's a good word.
Slowly building.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about reactivity. So in two different areas of like my life, so, or maybe even three. So then there's the emotion of that we're dealing with that can be reactive, like on a personal level, like the credit card, or I get impatient when I'm driving because I've spent 20 years on the road as a salesperson, and I'm pretty good at it and can see things coming, and I get frustrated when other people can't and they slow me down, dumb stuff like that. The customer service person who takes a tone with you, and then you react according to that tone. And, now I take all the anger that I have on everything else in my life out on this poor, $9 an hour person who's doing nothing more than their job. Maybe not well, but that's all they're really doing. And so I have these emotions that are like in the personal space. And I think Mike's on the call. I know he's been muted, so I don't know if he's busy, but I'd love to get his perspective as a business person with a different level of experience. Because then there's reaction, like I'm thinking in business, and then also reaction that I had oddly enough, as a coach, as a basketball coach. And sometimes reaction is necessary. And maybe there's a different word, maybe it's response, because like in those stressful moments during a game as a coach, sometimes the plan is not working or the circumstances change. And so you need to be able to quickly assess, call a timeout, readjust in order to make an attempt to win the game in that moment. And in business, I've always kind of made a correlation that, I might have my whole calendar set for today, but something can happen that I must react to in order to survive it, or, make the most out of the opportunity or the day. And that brings in another set of emotions like stress and maybe even agitation. But I've noticed that for some, and maybe there's psychology behind this, but I've noticed that like in those situations, I actually perform with more urgency and clarity in some of those high stress moments in work and business. Now, in coaching, personally, it's not the same. And that's the weird like disconnect. So like in the personal emotion, I can collapse and shut down. But in the work environment or like the basketball environment, that's not the case. I heighten and I am more focused, and I could achieve way more in a short period of time. And maybe that's just my experience, and then I'm looking for another word besides react. And that I'm challenging myself to think in those moments where I become, more clear and accomplished in times of stress. Maybe the word isn't react, but respond. So that's kind of what I was dealing with when you guys were talking about that.
And listening to you, the word instinct came up. Like in those moments when it enhances your performance, I wonder if it's because you are operating completely from instinct, like reacting to the instant, like turning up a gear or two, and so focused on that drishti, that gazing point, that all of your attention and energy is going there. And maybe that's what is responsible for enhancing the performance. I
Yeah, I
think
don't
I
know.
jumped on Mike though. So sorry,
No,
Mike.
no,
if you
no, no,
wanted
no.
to-
That's a very valid comment, and Sean, thank you for sharing that. I think my own reactions are probably pretty similar. Kind of in the business world versus the personal. I've always sort of, I think with conflict, and maybe I defined it as conflict, and there's good conflict and bad conflict. And in business, where there's good, logical conflict, hey, we're trying to get to the right answer, or there's just there's a crisis that comes up and it's just something we have to handle. I always actually think I somewhat thrive in that, because I don't allow it to personally get at me. It's hey, we have a cause here, let's come together and figure this out, or let's just get the right answer. I don't need to be right. But together we can find that. Where it becomes more personal, and that, so in business, where say somebody says something about me and it's like they impugn me, I'll go 0 to high on angry almost instantaneously. And I've always struggled with that, because it probably hits some sort of insecurity button in there. Whereas if that would happen personally, like outside of the business world, I just tend to kind of withdraw. And like you're saying, it's almost like, I don't want to say I lock up, but my decision making ability I do find to be somewhat diminished. It'll take me longer to get to a decision. I'll mull it over more. I'll worry about things, maybe like the opinions or perceptions of myself to others versus, hey, let's just get to the right answer here. So I do find that when those things come across, it's a similar kind of reactive, but maybe I just define it differently. I don't know.
That's really great,
Thank you
Mike.
for that, Mike. I was just curious about, your personal experience being at the level of business you're in. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a head scratcher. I think all around it. I don't, I certainly look at my own experiences as just, another drop in the bucket. Where we all sit in the same room, right? So the idea is that we get to the right answer. And when that's not reflected to me, and it's finger pointing starts happening, that it either goes one of two ways. I get so frustrated with the inefficiency of the finger pointing, or if it's pointed at me, it's just, I'll lash out to just stop it, I'd almost distract it from going away, or I'll just, this is a waste of my time, and I walk off. And I know that probably both of those are less than helpful, but I'm aware that I do it.
That's a great
good.
first step. Yeah.
Yeah.
You said the word insecurity, and I
Yeah.
keep thinking of that after you said that. And there's something about that it's almost like it hits us at our core, and that reaction just it almost immediately follows. I need to think more about that, but yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that.
I mean, I'll
Well, I think-
take it a step, like it almost is like representative of kind of like an existential threat, but it's not, right? You could sit there, you're sitting across the table from somebody, there's no danger of anything, but as it's habitual, right? It's, this is a problem. And even if you don't, quote unquote, overreact, it still sort of hits probably the same side or the same place in the brain. But there's a difference between like a real like threat and what you're experiencing in an argument. But I find that it's still somewhat, it comes from sort of the same region.
It's that lizard brain, right? That reptilian fight or flight response.
Uh-huh.
I've been thinking about how I feel it in my body. Like I get bright red right away, and my whole body like flushes with heat, and that feels deeply reptilian as well.
Can't
There's
imagine
definitely
you
something
angry, Rachel.
evolutionary. Oh, I'm good at getting angry.
You need to document it. I think you need to document it. Honest to God, Rachel, when I have really, really, like I had just an awful moment with, I feel like every Thursday I have a shit morning with the kids where like I have some sort of meltdown. So coming into this call, I was like, I hope I don't cry through the whole thing. Like I was so mean and I yelled, and I often think of you, in like Rachel comes to mind, where I'm like, how would Rachel navigate this moment? Like I just can't I can't even
That's
picture
very
you
sweet.
being reactive. Well, one of the things that Mike, like this has been such a cool, like what Sean said, and then how Mike contributed to it, because it makes me think of like you behave in different ways around different people. Like there's a different level of outward reactivity you're willing to show, or that is like pulled out of you in different moments. Like at home, I'm willing to like be a little more like vocal, say, than at vocal in like a direct way with, like if I'm fighting with Josh or like the kids or something. Not that they're proud moments, but like it's like a bigger moment or something. So it makes me just curious about like, actually, Paula, it reminds me of what you said about Ezzy, because Ezzy's he's a tough kid, and tough in the sense that like he has really big emotions, and they get lost in a house with 4 other people, and you know, I'm constantly like worried about how he's like navigating life, lots of tantrums, lots of falling to the floor. But Paula said to me, but he is also so good at school. Like he's like, his teachers are like, what are you talking about? Like, I can't even imagine what a tantrum looks like. I'm like, what? Gordon, he's like biting me. But that's, I guess that doesn't mean that he's not feeling those emotions at school. He might still be reactive, but he's not like, it's not coming out of him in the same way. So it's interesting, like just because you don't like explode doesn't mean I'm not reactive. I might still feel that like flush that you're like talking about, Rachel, but just because I don't explode doesn't mean I'm not like really reactive. Yeah, this is a cool topic to explore as my cat bites me.
Or maybe we
This-
self-regulate according to the situation. You know, children, I think of this all the time, like they self-regulate at school and then they
Yeah.
come home at the end of the
And
day
they're
and lose their shit because they can
Yeah.
finally like not have to behave. They can be their most
Mhm.
tired selves or angry selves. And I'm sure, you know, that's human.
Do you
Much
think
more.
we
They're
do that
safe.
still as a-
Exactly.
They're safe. Yeah.
Do you think we do that as adults too?
You
Yeah,
just
I
ask
guess my family
husband,
sees like the
Mike.
worst of me.
I don't really want to ask my wife this question because I know the answer, so I'm just going to ask the group.
Our poor spouses. Why are you biting
You
me?
know, as you're saying this, it's like, gosh, that sounds like a really familiar pattern, and I can assure you that
Yeah.
I'm well above child age, so it's you know, I have an ID.
We're all just toddlers
like,
inside. I said it to Jen the other day. I was like, we're all just screwed up children walking around in these adult bodies, you know?
It's
We
so
are.
true.
So interesting.
Oh, somebody's ringing. And I have 3:34 here, so I should let you guys go because it's 1:30. But thank you for this great conversation.
It was
And
great.
thank you for sharing your reactive selves with each other. I appreciate it. It makes me feel less alone.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah.
And
Rich,
we'll
we
have
want that
one-
video. We want a video of you
Oh,
being
no.
reactive.
We'll see about that. We have one more Thursday, next Thursday,
couldn't
and then
stop.
after
Oh.
that, we're going to break for the holidays. So we'll just plan on one more. We'll make it through lesson 6, and we're doing great. We're 2/3 of the way done with the whole series at that point. So super work, everybody.
Rachel, then when do we resume? I don't know. I looked on the calendar. I didn't see any more invites after that.
Yeah, I took it off for the 23rd, the 30th, and then the 6th. We're in the Alps that week, so I'm not going to teach that week. So let's plan on resuming on the 13th of January.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you just
Sounds
can't
good.
wait for more, I'll give you all the links to all the previous lessons and you can just redo them all and watch them all again if you want.
We could gather on a Thursday morning and watch them again.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, everybody.
Thank you so
enjoy
much,
your
Rachel.
day. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.